All right, so this is one of those, if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody, and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? So I don't know if anybody's going to be watching this video or any series of this video, but I'll just give it a shot. So here's where I'm at. My name is Mike, and this is called a micro garden, spelled M-I-K-R-O, garden, like in garden bed. And basically what it is, it's the first phase of a series of projects. And so if we go up here to SketchUp, this is called the micro garden. And then there's a thing called a micro bed. And that's what's going to happen there is that we're going to basically take a whole bunch of the same parts and we're going to adapt a few things, change some stuff for headboards and so on. And then we're going to be able to make beds out of them. And then I'm in the early stages of what I'm going to call the micro shelter. And this is where I'm going to start changing some things, but this is going to be a stay tuned kind of thing. And this is going to be a roofed shelter, like a garden shed or something like that. And we're going to use again some of these same parts. So the way that I would do something like this, I basically created, you can see the tabs up on top here. I use tabs a lot. So I'm going to click on this one, the 4 posts. And when I draw, and then when I later on start doing cut lists and everything else, I start breaking some of these things down into like, okay, how would I do this in the shop? So these are the 4 posts that we would make to make a garden bed. These are the 4 panels without the posts that we're going to use to make the garden bed. And then we'd have, starting on the cut list, there would be the rails. So I'm basically I'm going back to garden bed. This top part right here, that's a rail, and then the bottom part is a rail. And so let's go back to that. So I have a tab up here called rails. So I'm taking those apart and laying them out. I lay them horizontal, landscape, because this is the way I would cut them on a miter saw. And then it's also the way I would be physically doing it when I measure. I measure from left to right. I'm right-handed, so I put my tape on my measure on the left side, and I measure from left to right typically. Now here I'm going to change that a little bit, but there's a reason for that. And anyways, then I start labeling each item, like this is called this, I call this the sequence. I use A, B, C, D, E because you can get up to what, 26 letters? I'm not sure. Anyhow, but A, B, C is somewhere. So here's C, D, E. This is how I would work it in a shop. But this is also, I teach classes in woodworking, and this is how I would ask my students to follow this. So we'll print these out, and then I would ask them to follow the A, B, C, D, E when they do every step. And then if we go back to the micro garden, these vertical pieces down here, just like in cabinets, so these guys right down in here, those are all styles, S-T-I-L-E-S. So I created a tab on basically how to build those. So here's the style. I call a style inner because they're a little different than some of the outer styles. You'll see that later. But basically I'm showing the dimensions for that. So anybody woodworking could know that the style is a 1 inch by 2.5 inch by 6 inch. And then I go on to say that I need 2 of these per micro panel. So here's the dimensions. I go into 3D on this one, and then I like using X-ray because of some of the joinery. I need to make sure that the screws aren't going to bang into each other, things like that. So on some of these, I use X-ray. I don't use it on all of them because it can get kind of confusing. So then I would go to, we now have if we have the rails made. So again, here's the rails right here. Here's the styles. Now when we do this, we're going to attach the rails to the styles. So here are those same rails. And then here are the styles. I have an inner style here and here, and I have a end style here and here, which again have a whole bunch of hardware mounted inside of them. And then I'm showing some clamps here. These are the R&R clamps. These are my favorite in the whole world. Very well kept secret. And again, you can see I'm going back to, I'm starting over now. A, place the mark on the rail. So place a pencil mark at 13 3/4. B, now these instructions again are for either myself or when I try to write them, I write them with the students in mind, that if I have a class with 6 students in it, most of the time they can follow this again on printed format or digital format and follow A, B, C. So they would spread some adhesives on the top of this and the bottom of this. They would align the corners, etc. So that's how I would start to get into some of the gluing portion of it. Now, if I go into the rail caps, and the rail caps are this, a micro panel, a micro framing, I call it, consists of a couple of things. You have, again, the stiles, and then you have the rails like in typical cabinetry, but then I add a third component both at the top and at the bottom. So this component here would be, I call it a rail cap. So if we looked at that from the side, right, now what we have is this going on. So there's a dado in the rail cap, and then by taking the stile, the two rails, those are already glued up and screwed to each other. Then we glue them and screw them into a rail cap, and basically what we've created is an I-beam. And so an I-beam is so strong, and that's, you know, like you see that in high-rise buildings. Steel construction is all I-beams, and that's what I'm really doing right here. So in order to do that, this is the way I would do it, and I do it in woodworking. It's worked. I've done many a project that way, and it's worked. And real common application for this is railings. So I used to build custom railings before I retired, and this is how I built most of my railings. So now what we have is, again, a set of instructions for doing rail caps, which would be to create the dado, and I show, here I get into a little more detail. So I'm using SketchUp to go into even more detail on how to make those dados. I'm just taking a separate board, showing the dimensions for each location, and that's how we're going to have that. Then I'm going to get into joinery. We can start to see the joinery here. Now this is a patented method of joinery. I happen to have the patent on it, and that's why I'm doing these drawings. That's why I'm doing courses and so on to try to get the word out about this joinery. But so you have two options on this threaded tenon. You can go to what would be called exposed joinery, and then you can go to what's called hidden joinery. From here it looks the same, but I'll go back to the drawing of the MikroGarden. Okay, so this is what I would refer to as exposed joinery, and this, I think, from an appearance standpoint, this is actually my favorite. And so exposed joinery means that we're going to take and we're going to attach my threaded tenons down in here onto the rail panels, and then we're going to have some bolts, threaded bolts, 5/16 bolts, that are going to come through. And you can see now why I use SketchUp, because I need to know that this bolt and this bolt are going that way. Well, this bolt is going that way, and if I didn't do that right, then the two would collide in the middle. So this is where I'm using that. Now again, this is exposed joinery, and so to make that look good, I'm going to be using steel plates. This is I think it's a 1 or 1 1/4, it's a 1-inch flat bar, and I believe it's like 6 or 7 inches long. It's showing as 7 right now, and I'm actually going to reduce that to 6. I'll show you that later and how I do that. And then it has 3 holes in it, or the potential for 3 holes. Let's put it that way. So when a single bolt is going off through the post, and then it's going to go that way to hold that panel to the post. But then on this one, 2 bolts are going to go to hold this panel. And because of that, I need 3 holes or potential holes in this. And again, this is called exposed joinery. What I don't show yet is we can actually delete that method right there, and then we can go inside here. Now this is representing basically that tin you can buy. It's off the shelf, oh gosh, you know, like galvanized type stuff. So I'm going to hide that for a second. And what we can do with hidden joinery is we can go inside, and then we can take and send the fasteners through the side panel through one of the stiles. So it'll end up going through here into the post. And the only issue with that is that then you can't get at it, because once you put the inserts in the panels, then you're not going to be able to get those bolts anymore. That may or may not be an issue. Or it's kind of a semi-hidden, where we can send the bolt through there as well. And then, but you will see the head of the bolt like right in here. And again, The only difference is that the bolts will now travel from the stile into the post, and that could be done with conventional screws like GRKs or log hogs. That can be done without the fancy hardware. So that's where we're at on this particular one. And then let me just see what else I've got up here. So I've got exposed joinery. Again, I'm going up to these tabs. I've got hidden joinery. And then again, for me and for my students, what I want to do is I want to have a materials list. And so what I'm doing on this one, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but basically what I'm saying is this, is I need to come up with the parts to create a panel. So that cap, I need the rails, I need a couple of stiles, another rail cap, I need some posts. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the panel portion and saying, all right, what if I bought a board? And that's what I'm doing here. I'm starting right now with an actual, this is a 10 foot, let's see, 5/4 by 6 from Menards. And I'm just getting ready to test one of these. I just bought one and I'm going to test it. It should work, but it's a 1-inch thick board. Because it's 5/4, it's actually their deck boards, so they have them in stock all the time. So again, they call it a 5/4 by 6 by either 8 foot or 10 foot or 12 foot, and they stock a lot of them, and it's in red cedar, which is perfect for a garden bed. So from that, I'm saying, all right, I'm taking these pieces and I'm overlaying them where I would probably cut them from. So I would be cutting a 2.5 inch by 40. I would be cutting a 2.5 or a 3 inch by 40, and then a couple of the smaller stiles. And we'll see what's left, how much waste I have, etc., etc. So that's how I would end up drawing this. And then let's just go back to the original where we started, which is the micro rail. And again, this project to me would be a little too complicated if I'm going to try to continue to run all these cut lists and everything else showing a bed and a micro shelter and all that. So instead, I'm going to now actually delete a whole bunch of this other stuff that I had already drawn, create a new file, and focus only on the micro bed, or excuse me, the micro garden. So that's where I'm at this point.